Yes. So,
Okay.
tell me a little bit about your childhood. How is it that Susana is here today? Te voy a seguir haciendo preguntas. I'm gonna keep asking you questions in between
Of
because I
course.
want to know. I know where to
Sure.
go. I think I know where
Yeah.
to go, where to stop, and whatever.
Okay.
Pero you stop me whenever, here is okay.
Okay.
So, Susana, where she came from?
Well, to be honest with you, when I hear a lot of women speak about the abuse that they have endured, and a lot of them share that in most of the cases, you hear that they grew up seeing this at home. Correct, right?
Right.
But in my case, the hardest thing for me was figuring out why I continued to fall into abusive relationships when I didn't see it at home. So for me, the healing was harder, or getting to the root of the problem was harder, because it wasn't a behavior that I saw at my home. So I had nowhere to go to figure something out that needed to be fixed.
Yes.
I for anyone that knows me, I grew up under my father's ministry. My father, I'm named after my dad. My dad was Susana Arroyo.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm the oldest, so I'm Susana Arroyo.
Of course.
So, the really nice thing was that my father and I had a very close bond, and we had more than a daughter and dad. We had a spiritual, a very strong spiritual bond, and when because of my dad and my parents, is where I learned how to love God. And through his ministry, I fell in love with God. I fell in love with the God he spoke about and the God that he preached about. And I grew up with a very close relationship with God. But it took many years for me.
Wow.
To really come to terms. This was the hardest for me. That unconsciously, let me express that. Right. Unconsciously, then this is still hard for me. He was also the person that affected me the most when it came to understanding love and what to expect from a man.
Wow, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Can you explain that concept in your life? Because I'm sure a lot of us have gone through that in some way, some healthy and not healthy. But you're telling me you never lived domestic violence, but your relationship with your father was the one.
Yes, because the thing about it is that in my case, I never saw my father mistreat my mom. Okay. I never saw him once mistreat my mom. I never saw my father put his hands on my mom. But remember, in the times where we're growing up in where there's a lot of religion and there's a lot of legalism. Yes. And strongholds of religion are like the worst. I think that coming against strongholds of religion and legalism is almost worse than coming against any addiction.
I agree.
It's almost easier to deal with someone and minister to someone that has some drug addiction or has some deep issues in their life than it is to deal with someone that is bounded by religion and rituals and legalism.
Oh my God, that is so true. That is so true.
Yeah,
it's hard. It is.
It's the hardest, and so
they know it all.
Yes, and so in reality, so for me, I must say that what happened to me was, and we're supposed to be honest, right?
Right. Releasing truth, right?
Yes. What was hard for me was that I never saw my father. And again, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. Although he's with the Lord, I'm going to go ahead and kind of like excuse it, and I'm going to accredit it to religion, and I'm going to accredit it to boundaries of legalism, because maybe he didn't think it was proper. But I never saw my father being affectionate towards my mom. I never saw him being loving towards my mom. I never saw my father once take my mom to a restaurant. I never saw him once take her on a vacation. I never saw, my father was married to his ministry.
Oh, wow.
He was married to his ministry. And so therefore my mother was always there for him, and my mother was involved in ministry with him. But I don't think my mom was receiving what she needed from my dad as a husband.
Absolutely. He was giving it all to the church.
He was a pastor. He was a pastor at all times. He was a pastor, at home. He was a pastor everywhere. So for me, what began to happen to me was that in secrecy, I began to hold on to that. I began to say, wait a minute. I don't want this for me.
Wow, yes.
I'm gonna serve God. I'm gonna seek God. I'm gonna let God use me however it is that he wants to. But this right here is valid, and I have the right to hold on to this.
Right.
Because if this is what Christian men offer the woman, I don't want it for me.
Isn't that true?
And so one of the observations that I was making when I was growing up was that, and it could be that the enemy was taking advantage of the situation. It could be that the enemy was playing me, whatever it is that you want to call it. I just don't remember. And I know people are going to not be happy with me, but I really don't care. But one of the things that I observed is that I didn't see the woman in the church happy either.
¿Tú sabes qué? Oh my goodness. That's it.
Yeah.
I'm going Spanglish here because
it's okay.
Come on.
It's okay.
I wish people will preach about that. Que la gente predique de eso, because they teach you to just dedicate yourself to God and God only, and everything else comes after. And they forget that the first ministry that God put in your hands is the home. Entonces, nuestra familia no es tan contenta. Nuestros hijos crecen rebeldes, and they leave the church at a certain age when they can. And oh my God, you hit a point that for many years, yo crecí y vi como eso alrededor. Y mujeres que te decían, ay, yo era así antes. I was like that before. I was, oh my God, my hair, o arreglarse. And te dicen, ay, sí, yo lo hacía, y te miran con eso como que se le abren los ojos. But in top of everything, también a tener la relación matrimonial así is awful. And I lived it.
Yeah, I don't remember, like I said, probablemente el enemigo aprovechó y tomó ventaja del asunto, porque ahora que yo soy mayor, yo puedo decir, bueno, el enemigo tomó ventaja, pero en realidad todavía, and I'm going to go back to English, when I look back, I don't remember the woman. I don't remember, maybe there was a few, but I don't remember the woman in our church being happy. So here I come and I go to church and I see these women, and I've always been very observant. Mm-hmm. So here I am, I'm a young girl, I'm in church, and I look at the women and they look so sad.
Miserable.
And a lot of them look so miserable that I said, oh my God, y esto es lo que me espera a mí when I grow older? I don't want it.
Right.
So I don't want it for me. So in my home, I was the oldest one, and yet was the last one to leave my home because I was so afraid of marriage. I was so afraid of marriage because I desired for me a loving husband.
Right. Y no lo veías. You didn't see that in your home.
I didn't see it. So I was saying, oh my goodness, is this what Christianity is? You know, and the thing is that I began to seek God and I began to seek him and develop a relationship with him. But still that part of me was so, because it was so valid, it was real. I know what I was seeing. You couldn't convince me otherwise.
Yes.
So, you know, I'm not saying that my father didn't love my mom. And I have to say this, I'm going to take a small pause, because if people are hearing me that knew my dad, I have to mention, just to give them the satisfaction, because no puede aparecer el nombre de él sin que aparezca que él falló. Mi papá falló, pero for me, he continued to be a man of God. He didn't stop being a man of God because he failed.
No, let me tell you something. Just to piggy, right on what you just said. David falló. Yeah. He still continued to be a man of God. Le dijo que era conforme al corazón de Dios after all he did. So, hello.
Yeah, I just have to throw in that, because I just, because if people are listening, they're going to say, yeah, the father that failed. Yeah, that same one. Yeah, that one. But the thing about it is that I continued, you know, God would use me in ways that I was leading praise and worship during my father's ministry at a very young age. I was leading the youth. I was teaching the youth on Sunday school. And I began to see God do amazing things. Youth were being delivered in the class. Youth were being saved in the class. There was youth that would travel on summers just to go to the class and they would be saved. Wow. But the thing about it, in secrecy, I still had that there, and there was no one's going to touch that.
Right.
Because I had more than reasons. And so what happened to me was that I got married.
Okay.
I got married, and
how old were you? Since you was the last one to leave home.
24.
Wow.
24. And when I got married, everything that I feared, I lived.
Wow.
Yeah, everything that I feared, I lived, and some. And I don't want to go into the details, because I have kids and I have grandchildren. And because when it comes to me, I really want to be careful into not falling into a victim mentality.
Right.
And that's a fine line right there, because, you know, women need to know that it is good for them to share their story. If it's going to edify someone, or if it's going to be part of your ministry, it's perfectly fine. But when you find yourself sharing your story too many times, what can happen is that psychologically, mentally, you fall into a victim mentality.
You turn that switch.
There's a fine line there. And so I've been healed, and they have been forgiven. And I say they because I was married twice.
Okay.
But I have to tell you that when I got out of my first relationship, I didn't weigh 90 pounds.
Wow.
I didn't weigh 90 pounds. And if you would put 25 cents in my hands and change, it would have taken me a hard time to count it.
Wow.
Because it has such a traumatic effect with my mind.
Traumatized.
That I still to today don't know how I got out of that, you know? Wow. And one of the things that I've learned is that a lot of times women have a hard time coming out, because unless they have someone validating or telling them that you're doing the right thing, get out, unless they have that, they don't feel that they can do it.
Right.
But in reality, no one needs to believe that what I'm going through is real. No one needs to give me permission to get out. I'm going to get out and let people believe whatever it is that they want to.
True.
That's where you have found real freedom. That's where it is. And you have to, because if you have to try to convince people of what you went through was real, then you're never going to be able to get out of that. You have to let people think, and if the man is saying no, that's a whole bunch of lies. None of that is true. Because that's what they say all the time.
Right.
None of that's the truth. I was the best man ever. I was the provider. I was so good. Let them think whatever they want.
They'll be in denial. That's why we
In
can't.
denial.
Yeah, we can't tell people what to do. And I always tell people that ask me, you can't tell your daughter, whoever you see going through stuff, you cannot tell them what to do. Just show them your support. I'm here for whenever you're ready to come out. If you need options, I have options. If you need a plan, I can help you with a plan. But I cannot tell you what to do, because that's not going to work.
It's not. The woman has to be ready. We cannot, and one of the things that is so hurtful for a woman that is in an abusive relationship, and I still hear it, and it still hurts me when I hear people be insensitive and have lack of empathy and say, well, she should be, she needs to get out of that, and I don't even know why she hasn't left. Well, you know what it is? Maybe you've not been in an abusive relationship. Yeah. They have like a control. It's like a control of your mind. They almost take a control of your person. Yes. And you're almost look okay to the world, but you're physically in a prison that you can't escape.
Right, it's a spiritual prison. I heard this, and I heard it a couple of times. They say, she must like it. She's still there. And they don't know. And we don't talk. When we're going through that moment, at that time, we don't tell anybody. A few people know because they've seen, or we have told them because we can't, we just let it out to someone. But people always, ¿cómo se llama eso? They assuming things. And they think they know all the answers, and they want to give it to you. So, wake up, smell the coffee, get out. But that's not, it's not that easy. It's not.
It's really not. It's really not. So I didn't know how to get out. I just didn't. If anybody asked me, why didn't you get out? I just didn't know how to do it. And one of the things, I was afraid that my father would be so hurt by it, because every decision that I made, I considered him. Wow. I loved my dad so much that any decision that I made, I didn't want to add to any hurt or hurt him in any way. So I was, yes, shame, exactly. I was very protective of him. So to be honest with you, one of the worst days of my life, my mom passed away last year, and that was horrible for me. And I still suffer that. There's still times where I'm driving and I kind of like can't find the air. I kind of like feel like I can't breathe because I still can't believe she passed. And but one of the hardest times for me, and one of the most hurtful times, was when my dad passed away, because my dad and I were so close. Mm-hmm. My dad and I, he would knock at the door of my room and he would tell me, are you sleeping? And of course I was, but he woke me up, Uh-huh. And he would say, come out, come out of the room. And we would go to the living room and we would spend hours speaking, opening the word and talking about the word of God. And that's my relationship with my dad was like that. So for me, if I would come out of the relationship and I would say that I was in an abusive relationship, I was afraid that my father wasn't going to be able to handle that. Okay. I was, so when my father passed away, as hard as it was, I knew that it was only a matter of a time before I got out because I had no one else to protect at that time.
Right.
Isn't that weird?
Yes.
It was really hard. So I was like completely, I used to feel, in the relationship, yo me sentía, I used to feel like the way that I described it at that time, I used to feel like an octopus had a hold of me. You know that the octopus has like a lot of hands? So I felt that once I was free from one hand, another one grabbed me.
I see.
Free, I felt so entrapped that I couldn't see my way out of it.
Was you still trying to serve God through all of that? Going to church?
Yes.
Because I talk a lot about having a hard time having a relationship, a true relationship with God when you feel like that. When you are trapped in so many, ¿cómo se llama eso? Tentáculos that you can't breathe and you can have a genuine other than help me, God. How did you describe your relationship with God?
Actually, I was reading something on that subject. I was reading something that says that most of the women, when they come out of abusive relationship, one of the things that's affected is the relationship with God. Mm-hmm. Because it takes a long time for you to heal. Healing isn't overnight. Healing is a process. Correct. And that's another thing. We can't rush people's process. That is their process.
Exactly.
That is their process. And the longer, whatever time it has to take for you to heal, just go ahead and take the time. But for me, I went to God more afraid than anything else. I was always praying that I would that I would survive it, that somehow I could survive. And it was so bad. It was so traumatic, even for my children, and the hardest thing was that he was a preacher.
This is the first husband.
He was a preacher, a theologist.
My God.
And when the microphone wasn't in his hand and the suit was off, it was a completely different person that I was dealing with, And I remember that I would hide in the closet and I would make myself like in a little ball in the closet, and I would beg God to somehow deliver me or take me, because I used to tell God I don't know how to get out, so the easiest way for me to get out is if you take me. It would be much easier, Yeah. But one day, I don't know how it happened. One morning I got up and it was almost like something happened, and I said, this is it. Today is the day. And I'm going to say something that's crazy, but one of the things that he used to use, and I really didn't want to go into too many details because of considering my children and considering my grandkids. And so I'm going to say something that's really bad, and I really don't care, but this is my story.
Of course.
One of the things was that he would, when he suspected that I was going to leave him, he would get sick. Manipulation is really strong. Yeah. He would get sick. He would grab his chest. There were times where I used to have to rush him to the hospital, and the doctors used to say, "You got to take it easy. He's got to take it easy." He can, it was out of this world. It was a manipulation to another level. And one day, I left, and I said, when I come back, I said, I'm leaving, and when I come back, you're going to have left the house and take whatever you want to. But when I come back, you have to be gone. Mm-hmm. And then I did do something that wasn't right. I said, if you get any temptation of any sort, the pills are in that drawer right there, and the cabinet's right there.
Yeah, because you already were used to the manipulation.
Yeah, I was letting him know it wasn't gonna work.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I was letting him know. I'm done. It's over. You have no stronghold on me anymore. How God did it, I don't know, but it was like I was set free. I'm not saying that what I did was right.
Right.
It's not what I'm saying. I guess that at that point, what I was trying to convey to him, that none of his things were going to work. I said, if anything, if you get one of those crazy ideas, the medicines are in that cabinet, and the rope is over there.
You just whip it up. You wanted him to know that you were tired.
I was sick of it. And that's how I got out of that one, But again, it wasn't easy. I got out of the relationship. I was, like I said, I didn't weigh 90 pounds. I was afraid of everything. I was afraid if I heard a sound, I would jump. When I was driving, I was afraid, it was almost like I was borderline of losing my mind. I can't explain.
I want you to talk about, because remember in the conversations we had before, was your emotional state. You don't have to go in details, but remember when you told me that anxiety hit your stomach and you had your stomach removed, half of it, because of anxiety. I want you to touch about that a little bit, because it happens to a lot of us, where we can panic attacks, anxiety, and we get sick emotionally because it's so strong that it takes a toll on your health. So I want you to, how that happened to you.
Yeah, remember that I did mention that I was married twice.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I got out of the first relationship, when I got divorced the first time, I stayed with I stayed by myself with my children for over 7 years. And when I stayed with my children for over 7 years, it was really hard. I don't think my kids will ever comprehend how difficult it was. You know why? Because if I tell you that when I got out, I didn't weigh 90 pounds, and that when I got out, you would put 25 cents in my hands and I couldn't count them. With that mind, I still had to raise 2 kids.
Yeah.
So, and I say that for a reason. I say that it is important because even in that condition, I had to try to do the best I could in raising my kids.
Mm-hmm.
Then I was by myself for over 7 years, but remember, I had this that was valid. Now this situation made it more to where I really didn't want to be involved with a Christian man. Mm-hmm. And then this time there was no. Yes, and at this time there was no one going to tell me otherwise. There was no one going to convince me, because now I really had to live it myself. So I did what I don't recommend any woman to do. I married an ungodly man. Mm-hmm. And
of course you went the opposite.
I went the opposite, because I said somewhere there has to be a man that is capable of loving me.
Right.
There has to be a man that knows how to love me. And obviously it's not a Christian man. And so I married an ungodly man. And what happened to me there was that he was a man that gave me things. He was a man that gave me nice cars. He was a man, and that's another misconception. And let me take a pause right there. And I'm going to say this in Spanish. Can I say this in Spanish? Yeah. Porque mi papá decía, cuando nosotros nos criábamos, mi papá decía que miren a ver que el hombre con quien ustedes se casen tenga buen trabajo y sea un hombre que sea buen proveedor, porque uno ni come amor, ni duerme en amor.
Oh my God,
ni paga la luz con amor, ni paga la renta con amor.
Es verdad, it's true.
Y eso es verdad. But eso es verdad. But this is it. So here I go, and I married a man that gave me things, that gave me whatever I wanted. The nice house, the nice cars, whatever I wanted. But the more he gave me, the lonelier I felt. The more he gave me, the sadder I felt. The more he gave me, again, completely alone, until I learned, I want to be careful with the word I use. That's narcissism. Eso es narcisismo.
Exacto.
Yeah, a narcissist will give you the world. A narcissist will give you everything, but a narcissist will never give you them. They are not emotionally available.
Right.
They're not emotionally available. So whenever you're going through something and you want to come to them to share it with them, they hand over the credit card because you're not going to give you their shoulder. And to be honest with you, I didn't know what was going on. So every time I try to approach him, he would kind of like
stop you.
Yeah, he didn't want, he liked the good part of a relationship, but not the work of it.
Okay.
And so having to deal with the constant rejection, having to deal with, and I would have to beg him if I could share something with him.
Oh, wow.
I would have to almost, it was like you were walking around in eggshells.
Yeah.
And I would have to say, can I tell you something? Can I share something with you? I want to share. I don't know. I don't. I said, but I really need to tell you this. And he would start screaming at me like a nut, to the point and where I used to get scared because he would scream at me out of control, to where I would have to hold on to something and shake because I thought I was going to pass out. Like I would go like a blackout.
Okay.
The screaming was almost to have you terrified.
Wow.
But remember, in his mind, he's a great man. In his
mind,
he's a really good man, because girl, a ti no te hace falta nada.
Right.
No, nada, casi nada.
Todo lo interno.
Todo era. So, you live in the pretty house, and you have the nice things, and you drive the nice car. And I had family members that told me, pero dale gracias a Dios que está en la casa, que no está fuera tomando, que no está fuera con los amigos, que no está jangueando, dale gracias a Dios. And I was thinking to myself, si se fuera a janguear, yeah, I don't understand. Yo decía, if y'all don't know. And I got sick because I was constantly afraid. I didn't know how the next day was going to look like. I didn't know how 5 minutes from now was going to look like. I didn't know if something that I told him was going to trigger him into screaming at me and losing it and punching things or punching the walls or kicking things around. I didn't know, so I was constantly in fear.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden, pero más sin embargo, to be honest with you, I looked okay to the world.
Of course.
I looked fine to
That's what we do.
Yeah, I looked okay. I looked like there was nothing wrong with me. And one of the things that I did to kind of avoid was that we began to work different shifts. I would work daytime and he'd be home daytime. And when I would arrive, I would wait outside in the car till he would leave to his second shift. And that way, but when the weekends came, I didn't know what to do with myself, because now I'm locked up in that house with him. And like I tell you, to be honest with you, still till today, if I call him up and I say I need something, he will not have a problem with helping me. I say this to say that I have a son with him.
Uh-huh.
Okay, there's still some sort of
Connection.
Yeah, because I do have a son with him. But all of a sudden, I would start getting a pain in my stomach, but the pain was so severe that my body would go into convulsions and I couldn't get up, and I would begin to sweat profusely, like if somebody had thrown a bucket of water on me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an indescribable pain, and it was because my intestine would get kinked.
Right.
My intestine would get kinked, and so I would be rushed to the hospital, and they would have to, through tubes in my nose, unkink my intestines and pump my intestines, and that happened for 4 times. On the 3rd time, the doctor said, I don't know how you fell into my hands, but I'm going to have to perform surgery because on the next time that you have this episode, you will not make it alive.
Oh, wow. Because
the intestine was so damaged that and the next time that it would get pinched, it would explode. And that would have been the end of me. So I had surgery, and they removed that part of the intestine and reconnected the intestines, and I have never had an episode again, praise God, since 2014.
Wow.
But it does affect you, it does, and it does affect you. But I wanted to share one something that I wanted to share a small an anécdota.
See, story.
That the ego is known for where their best visibility and the best time that they can see anything is when they go very high. And once they began to come lower, they began to lose visibility. And I've heard a story once about that one time this eagle was flying so low that without realizing she was trapped, she fell into a cage with a rooster. And she was stuck in that cage with the rooster for some time, to the point in where she forgot she was an eagle.
Come on.
And when she forgot she was an eagle, she began to crow like the rooster. And she began to go around in circles like the rooster because she forgot who she was.
Right.
And she forgot she was an eagle. And one day, without her expecting it, without her knowing how it happened, because remember, she didn't have any visibility being up that close. She was trapped. But one day, while she's going around in circles, she falls off the cage. She falls out the cage because the door was open. That door was open, and when she fell out of the cage, immediately she flew up because she took her identity back, and she knew and remembered who she was. And when I'm saying this, I am saying this to say that God has opened that door for women that are in abusive relationships. He wants us to take back our identity and understand that he has paid the price to set us free. So I was that eagle trapped inside that cage with that rooster. And after being with that rooster for so long, I began to crow and make the same sounds he made and go around with circles the way he did. But somewhere, somehow, God allowed for me to see those doors open, and I flew out of that, and I am at a different place, and where God has shown me exactly what he delivered me from. And in order for me to understand what God has done, I have had to go back to my childhood and understand where it all started for me.
Wow.
That's
deep.
deep. Yes, it is. It is. And I will tell you that it hasn't been easy because at my age, I'm 59, and I'm
You look
raising
good.
a child.
You look great.
Thank you. And at my age, I'm raising a teenager. So it's not easy. You know, that part is very hard for me. But you know, up to now, God has given me the victory.
Amen.
And I wish that men, you know, I wish that there was a lot of more teachings in the church, and I've heard your pastor speak, and I've heard you speak, and I've heard a lot of even a doctor that comes into your program and speaks. And I think that a lot of people don't understand that the marriage is supposed to model Christ to the world. Marriage is supposed to be used to model Christ to the world.
The Bible says that the man should love the wife like God loves.
Exactly. Exactly. And you know, I want to share. I know we're running out of time, but I want to share something that happened to me. I had already understood where the root of my problem came from. And I want you to know that even in all of this, I led praise and worship for over 25 years.
Wow.
Even with all of this, I led praise and worship in some churches up to 3 services on a Sunday.
Wow.
And God still used me for his glory, you know, because he gets all the glory regardless, you know. But at the end of the day, the Bible says that he wants us to prosper as well as our soul prospers. That means that in prosperity, abuse doesn't fall into prosperity.
Exactly.
If you're in an abusive relationship, it's not God's intention and God's desire for you to stay in there. It isn't what he wants for us, you know?
Exactly.
And what happened to me was that I had already understood it. I have already been healed. But God did something amazing for me. Last year,
okay,
I went to through my job. I went to a family, and I didn't know who this family was. But when I went into this home, they had praise and worship going on. And when they had praise and worship going on, you could sense the presence of God. And then when I met the man of the house, he gave me his name, introduced himself. And when we began to talk, he was a pastor that had retired.
Oh my.
Mira qué tremendo. No, look at lo hizo. He didn't have to do it, but he took it upon himself to show me something that I needed to see.
Oh my. So
then all of a sudden, he takes me into a room and he introduced to me his wife.
Oh, wow.
His wife had dementia. His wife couldn't articulate words. His wife couldn't express herself. His wife couldn't really understand what you spoke with her. And then I went there again the next day. And when I went the next day, I was saying, God, what am I doing here? Because although I was there for work purposes, I began to sense that God wanted to do something with me there. Mm-hmm. And he told me, Susie, I want to show you what I do all day. Would you like to see? And I said, yeah. And then he says, you're ready? And I said, yeah. He took his wife into the bathroom. He showered her. He washed her hair. He blow dried her hair. He dressed her. And he would tell her, honey, look at yourself in the mirror. Look how beautiful you are, babe. And he took her to the living room. He sat her in the sofa and he put praise and worship and he covered her. And then all of a sudden I started crying. And I says, what is it? You know how they say, I wish I was a fly in the wall so that I can see what happens inside. God allowed me to be that fly so that I can see that there's still men of God that know how to love their wives, because I had never seen that.
Goodness.
And although he had healed me, and although he had taken me to the root of my problem, he still took it a little bit further and allowed me to go into a home to show me something else. And I said to him, I need to talk to you, because I started crying. He says, are you okay? Are you okay? And I said, let me share with you my story. And I said to him, God brought me here so that I can see something different, something that I had never seen. And he says, Susie, I have 4 kids. And when I love my wife, I am modeling Christ to my children.
Jesus.
I am modeling Christ to my children. So they have to see me how I love her.
Uh-huh.
And I said, yeah, but you don't understand. So what God did, that was last year. At the end, the last week of last year, almost as if God had brought me full circle, as if God wanted to do something new, but in his love for me, he wanted me to know that this still exists. And I have cried, and every time I remember that story, I cry, because I have understood that there are men that love your wife, and there are men. So I'm not generalizing. I'm not saying that this does not exist. Mm-hmm. But I wish, I desire that the churches would take time out and minister to men and teach men the importance of loving your wives, and find ways of being affectionate and being open. I heard a story a couple of years ago of a husband that got home from church, and after a Sunday, a pastor of a huge church, and he told his wife, hey, honey, what do you think about the message? And honey, wasn't that an amazing service? And he kept on going and going, and she was quiet. And then she goes, what do you think, honey? You haven't said it. She goes, let me tell you something. I want you to sit down.
Oh, God.
I respect you as a husband, as a pastor. I admire you as a pastor, and I admire you as a husband. The issue I have with is you as a husband to me.
Wow.
So for me, men in ministry, it's not for me.
Uh-huh.
Okay, it's not for me. Que si dicen, que si la gente quiere decir eso, es que no está sanada. No, eso es un riesgo que yo no voy a correr.
I agree.
You know, eso no es, people can say, oh, that means she's not healed. No, I am healed. I am.
Esas son dos diferentes cosas.
Esas son dos cosas diferentes. But for me, I will not take the risk, because it is very hard to find a man in ministry that has the ability to balance both things and be a full-time husband when he can still be a full-time pastor. Yes. That's very hard for being in ministry like that. But that, again, that's me.
You know what? No, it's so true, because
I'm not saying that it doesn't exist.
You know what it is? And this happens more in the Latino Hispanic community, where the pastors are all into the church. They gave themselves to the church. They died of heart attacks. There's some that died, they killed themselves, because they give all of them to the church. They forget about their health. They forget about their social life, and they forget about their family. And this is what happens when so I run away from that too. I run away. I love doing what I do. I love helping people. That's it.
Well, all you really need, I told my son one day, I think I told my oldest son, my kids are amazing. And I told my oldest son, like 2 years ago, my oldest son, I love him. His name is Emmanuel. And I said to him, I finally told him, Pero Emmanuel, I don't want to get married with a minister. I don't want one of those. And I don't want to marry a man in ministry or a man in a pastoral calling or nothing like that. Mejor me quedo sola, And you know what he told me? He said, Pero mommy, who told you have to marry a man in ministry? Where did you get this idea? Who said you needed to marry a man in ministry. He told me, Mommy, you don't even need a man that's charismatic, that needs the lights, that needs to be in the spotlight. You don't even need that. He says, what you need is a man that will back you up in your calling, that will have eyes all around so that when he sees the enemy coming, he can protect you.
Yes.
That's the type of man. I said, that's it. That's what I want.
That's what I want.
That's what I want. So yeah, God is amazing. You know, God is amazing. It's still hard for me. You know, I've been by myself again for 7 years. But I am
7 is your number.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. I'm running out of time. But I'm really happy, and I thank God for delivering me. I thank God for setting me free. And I thank God for the healing, for restoration. And I thank God because the Bible says that he can do abundantly and exceedingly above anything that we may ask or even imagine. Yes. And the reason why I say this is because a lot of women believe, there's another thing with abuse is when the woman created a dependency on the man to support them. But it's not until you step out in faith that you will not be able to see what God is capable of doing for you. Amen. Because a lot of times he won't bless you in the place that you're in, because the blessing will reach that man that he's trying to set you free from. That's right. And of course, this applies to both women and men, because I know that there's men that complain that there's women that are abusive as well. Yes, there is. I understand, but I am here to speak about us women, you know. Oh my God, this has been great. I thank you for this opportunity. And I think that one of the things that we have to be careful with is that we women are natural nurturers. We're natural nurturers. So yes. Sometimes we feel responsible for that abuser. Sometimes you want to change them like mommy changed the kids. Sometimes we feel responsible for that abuser, but in reality, we're not responsible for them at all. Mm-hmm. That's between them and God. Right. The only one that can work with them is God. It's God. We can't fix them. We can't change them. We can't do anything. The only one that can do something. And sometimes we have to take the nurturing part of us and just remove ourselves and let God do what he wants to do. But it's not our responsibility. Is there something you want, because we ran out of time. It's okay. It's okay. Is there something you want to advise these women that are watching us and that will watch us, because it will be recorded and it will be on YouTube later? So is there something do you want to tell everybody that's listening right now? Well, that there's hope, and that there's still life after abuse. Mm-hmm. You know, sometimes when we come out of abusive relationship, we're lost, because mentally, sometimes unconsciously, we become accustomed to some things that are not supposed to be part of our lives. But as time goes by and we began to heal, we began to be grateful for where God took us out from, and that God's desire for us, he never designed us to be in any type of captivity. And when we and so that he sent his son to set us free. Exactly. Okay, that's Amen. It. Okay. And I always say this to Piggy, right? On lo que dijiste. Yeah. God is not at fault for what men do. That's their decision. That's their way. They have options, and they chose whatever they chose. It's not God's fault. And it's keeping that faith. Mm-hmm. Keeping that faith. Right. It's not God's fault. It's a decision that they make. But it's also a decision that we make to stay. Yes. We have to also know that that's not God's desire for us, and he wants us to just flee. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He wants you to be free from bondage, and that's a bondage that will keep your relationship from God to flourish. So yes, it's been my pleasure to have you.
in their
Thank
program.
you for having me. Thank you.
Tell them where they can find your jewelry, because like we said in the beginning, she made this and she sent it, you know, she was a sponsor for our program, so she made jewelry.
Yeah.
Where can they find
my jewelry is Gabby, www.gabbyshadescreation.com. And my desire is to use my jewelry as a platform to reach women, so that the women use their gifts, use their talents, because it'll generate income into their lives, but it will also help them in not keeping their minds idle, because the Bible says, take every captivity and any imagination that exalts itself above the knowledge of God and bring it down into obedience to Christ Jesus. So it's an opportunity for women, and later on I will be doing YouTube and showing women how to do a couple of stuff, because they can also use their talents to generate increase, so that they don't have to feel that they need to stay in a relationship for the support, for the financial support. So they can look me up at www.gabbyshadescreation.com.
There you go. And then your page, in case your page will lead them to that page also. So
it's also in Facebook, Gabby Shaday's Creation, and also in Instagram.
My bracelet says Daughter of a King.
Perfect.
I love it.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you like it.
Gracias por estar aquí. Thank you for being here. Thank you,
Gracias.
Sherry. We need to do part 2.
Okay.
Somewhere along the calendar, we need to do a part 2. It was awesome. It was great. Espero que haya, tú puedes cliquear finish cuando estés ready para irte.
Deja por.
Gracias otra vez. Thank you for being.
Okay, God bless you. Thank you for inviting me.
Bye. Así que I hope you enjoyed today's show. It was mostly English because Susana is more fluent in English, so there she goes. Pero I hope you enjoy our show, our program. I will let you know on Messenger who got the raffle, because I will see who shared, quién compartió, comentaron, y entonces les voy a decir por el Messenger quién fue que ganó la rifa de hoy. Quiero darle muchas gracias. Ese testimonio de Susana es tremendo. I hope you could enjoy it, que compartieron, que se nutrieron en algún modo. ¿De dónde vino, de dónde fue la raíz de ella a buscar o estar con hombres abusivos en su vida while sirviéndole al Señor? Será hasta el próximo martes. Que no se lo pierda, por favor, no se lo pierda, manténgase conectada y comparta para llegar a más personas que puedan ser edificadas, puedan ayudarle estas vivencias en algún modo. Quiero decirle que estamos aquí a su orden. Si necesita, si quiere, ¿verdad?, ser parte de este programa, solamente comuníquese conmigo por las páginas de Facebook o al 317-610-0712, creo. Pero ahí estaremos y estaremos contestándoles. Si quieres auspiciar uno de nuestros programas, por favor también comuníquese con nosotros a las páginas y con mucho gusto estaremos intercambiando información. Así que será hasta el próximo martes a las 8 de la noche con otra vivencia para ti. Que se cuidan.